your access point to Washington. I'm Aisha Tanseem. We all read the news about Pakistan, and some of you live it daily. No electricity, no gas, petrol prices through the roof, killings, kidnappings, extortion, corruption, and on and on and on. But today we'll talk about a different kind of story, something that sounds so mind-boggling, especially when you put it next to the current news cycle, that it is almost unbelievable, even to those who are at the helm of it. Let's listen to this.
I have to say, from the beginning, I thought it was a mistake. And one of the greatest experiences of my life, one of the greatest learnings, is Pakistan is one of the up-and-coming entrepreneurial nations of the world. And 10 years from now, it will be the Turkey of the region, without a doubt.
Today, we tell you the story of the Pakistan 100, the companies that are going to make Pakistan the next Turkey of the region, according to Ann Habibi, the woman you just heard. And who better to join us in telling that story than the man who's at the top of that list? Abid Butt is the founder and chief executive of E2E, and that would be end-to-end supply chain management, one of Pakistan's leading provider of logistics services. He's joining us via Skype from Karachi. Meher Bano Sethi is another successful member of the Pakistan 100. She is the founder of Luscious Cosmetics, a Pakistani makeup brand that has grown exponentially and is now going global. She's also joining us via Skype from Lahore. And Mohsin Khan is joining us in the studios in DC. He's a senior fellow in the Rafiq Hariri Center for the Middle East at the Atlantic Council, focusing on the economic dimensions of transition in the Middle East and North Africa. Welcome to all of you.
Very much.
So let me first start with you, Abid, since you are the man at the top of the list. How did you get there?
Well, I mean, in a few words, I think we have a very good team, and we picked on an idea that was.
Okay, Abid. We can't hear you somehow. Your video is frozen. So, Mohsin Khan, I will come to you.
Yes.
Does it surprise you as an economist who looks at the region that on one hand we're talking about no electricity, no security, nobody wanting to invest there, and on the other hand, these companies are doing so well?
Yes, I mean, it is a puzzle that people have been wondering about. On the one hand, you have all the numbers, for example, growth, inflation, the balance of payments, telling you the country's in a free fall. At the same time, you have, on the other hand, a tremendous amount of economic activity. You go out into the streets of Pakistan and you see this activity. But the other important thing that I think is very relevant to the Pakistan 100 is the incredible growth in the middle class in Pakistan. I mean, it's estimated that there's, something like 70 million out of 180 or so fall into the middle class. They have a tremendous amount of demand for consumer goods, but they also have a demand for manufacturing goods. And so one can see that there are companies that in Pakistan that are doing extremely well. So there is this quandary as to what is the true Pakistan? Is it the numbers that are telling us that the economy is in a disaster state, or is it the other side, which is telling us that things are going pretty well and that it could be the Turkey of the future?
Meher Bano, let me come to you. Your company is one that started in the last 5 years, and as I was talking to you yesterday, you said that you're going global. Tell me a little more about that.
Hi, Aisha. Well, I started my company 5 years ago, and it was a little bit of a leap of faith because, homegrown brands in Pakistan had not at that time gotten a foothold, and there was no benchmarks to follow. And 5 years later, we find ourselves not only one of the largest cosmetic brands in Pakistan, but the South Asian women around the world are attracted to the brand, and we are currently supplying to 13 new countries from Pakistan.
So, Meher Bano, what I am surprised to find, or what anyone who's not intimately involved in the business environment in Pakistan wants to know is, how do you manage to deal with the lack of electricity, the lack of gas, the other problems? I mean, how do you produce stuff when there's no light, there's no security?
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, Aisha, in my opinion, whenever there's challenges, there is innovative thinking. You have to tailor your business plan to the ground realities. So, we do not manufacture our products in Pakistan. When I started my company, basically one could see the energy crisis looming. So we decided to manufacture abroad with some of the best cosmetic manufacturers. And also, however, there is a downside. I mean, I'm having a lot of trouble as we're growing so fast, hiring talent, getting good people, because there's been a massive brain drain due to the quality of life declining in Pakistan with no gas and with no electricity for the common man as well as for industries.
So, Mehrbana, you've raised a very important point that I want to come back to later. But before we go there, we also asked Ann Habibi, and let me introduce her at this point. She is the co-founder and now co-CEO of All World Network. That is the group that Pakistan 100 falls under. We'll talk more about that, but let's listen to what Ann had to say on how the Pakistani companies are succeeding in this environment.
But Pakistan actually resembles much more a real-world economy. It's challenging. Every day you have to be creative. And I think that's what the Pakistani entrepreneurs really show. They are resilient. They're in it for the long term. They're not worried about a short-term gain. In the United States and Europe, you hope to make a one-year investment and poof, they're in it and they know it's going to be hard. They know the energy is going to go off. They're making a long-term investment in one of the biggest markets of the world that is so underserved in so many areas. They think, how could they not be successful?
So, Mr. Khan, do you agree with what Ann Habibi just said?
I think that is true, that it does breed innovation, and I think they are in it for the long haul. I think the one problem that Mehrbana also raised, which is with regard to energy. I mean, we all know the problem of energy. And typically when we talk about energy, we talk about, you know, the average person losing electricity for 12 hours a day and, you know, the discomfort, etc. it creates. But there is a situation with regarding industry. Currently, in Pakistan, manufacturing industry is operating at something like 50–60% capacity. And the reason for that is simply a lack of energy. So if you're growing at 3%, right now, because of a lack of energy, a few years ago, you were growing at 7% because of capacity utilization. So I think, you know, if you like, security, politics, and energy are the major constraints that Pakistani entrepreneurs face right now.
So, Mehrbana, do you think that if you didn't have the energy problems in Pakistan, if you could manufacture in Pakistan, that you would grow faster, or it would be easier to do business for you?
Well, one of the problems that I face on a daily or monthly basis is the devaluation of the rupee in terms of an import business. That is quite a challenge, trying to keep your pricing stable. And I wouldn't say that I would shift all of my production to Pakistan, but if I could have a 40–60 or a 50–50 production here and abroad, my bottom line would definitely benefit from it.
Okay, Abid, we have you back on the phone. Unfortunately, not on Skype. We lost your Skype. We'll try that again. But before we even go on, tell us a little bit about your company, what you do. We talked about the energy and security problems in Pakistan. How much of that is a big problem for your company?
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, energy is one of the, and security are these are two things that will have effect on businesses in general and business confidence, in general. But there's so many opportunities in Pakistan of things that aren't happening here that are available, products, services that are available in the Western world, in the Far East that aren't available in Pakistan, and so you can, if you're entrepreneurial, you're like a kid in a candy store if you're in Pakistan, because there's so much you can do. For example, in 7 years since I've come back, I've went to my fourth venture, and all of them have been very successful. And the reason for that is that all we're doing is we're working professionally, we're working diligently, but at the end of the day, we're just replicating what's being customizing what's being done abroad a little bit, but basically replicating I mean, I'll give you an example. Our primary company is a logistics company, and there are about 15,000 logistics companies in Pakistan, but none of them provide a one-stop shop solution, and this is very common abroad. And 7 years later, we're now in the top. One of the top 3 or top 4 logistics companies in Pakistan, and we're still the only one that provides.
You're the only one that provides the one-stop shop. Now, Abid, before we even move forward, since we haven't done so, I want to talk a little bit about what Pakistan 100 really is. And because the first time I heard the story, I was baffled, honestly, because I cover business news, but not to the extent. The Pakistan 100. Tell me how you heard about it, and what is it?
I mean, I didn't really hear the question properly, but I'll try to answer it. Pakistan 100, for me, it's all about visibility economics, which basically means that through organizations like All 100, companies that are participating in this sort of network have access to
companies abroad,
more capital, better people, and a larger base of customers. So this this is exactly what's happened. What's happened to us with this when we joined All World. I'm not saying it's all because of All World, but we're one of the All World babies. We were only doing something like $4 or $5 million when we first entered All World. Now last year we did 75. So in 3 years, this is what I'm not saying All World has achieved all of that for us, but
it's helped. Okay, Meher Bano, let me come to you and let me tell our viewers and our listeners what Pakistan 100 is. It is a network of companies that Ann Habibi and her co-founder found, basically joining companies from around the world so they could each know each other, do business together, better visibility. Meher Bano, have you had any success with joining? What led you to apply for it, and have you seen any benefits?
Well, definitely. First of all, I'd like to definitely commend Ann Habibi on her initiative and having such faith in the Pakistani entrepreneur. I was referred to it by a friend of mine from the Daud family, who's also a big part of sponsoring Pakistan 100 in Pakistan. And definitely the visibility has helped us a lot. I've already had quite a few approaches regarding private equity, which we had not even considered before.
Okay, so Mr. Khan, let's talk about some of the things that Meher Bano mentioned, which is the devaluation of rupee.
Right.
And not being able to manufacture in Pakistan, whether it's because of lack of energy or lack of right talent or whatever other reasons. How is it affecting business in the country? And can the government learn something from these companies, not sort out everything, but
well, I think
maybe something?
this transfer of businesses abroad has been going on for a little while now, for the reasons that you mentioned. Meher Bano talks about her industry, but also, for example, in very basic industries that are Pakistani industries like textiles, moving to Bangladesh, for example, in order to be assured electricity, to be assured a labor supply, to be assured security, etc. That's natural. And so that does matter. I think that there are a lot of indicators that, as I mentioned earlier, that point to a problematic economic situation other than security and politics, but and the devaluation of the rupee, because essentially you're running low on international reserves. Naturally, by the market pressures, the rupee is going to be devalued. I think I would just I should note 3 bright spots on the horizon. One is that I mentioned earlier, the growth of the middle class, which is a tremendous market in the country. The other is in fact the growth of remittances. I mean, remittances have been skyrocketing. I mean, this year, for example, they're close to $15 billion dollars coming into the country. So the growth of the middle class, the growth of in some sense, the informal economy, which is growing. I mean, people are getting work, but to me, and we could discuss that further, I think these are all developments that have taken place, I would say,
despite the government's
I wouldn't say that, have not been government. But I'll tell you one very important government change that has taken place, which is the sort of move towards better trade relations with India.
And you recently came out with a report about trade relations with India. Tell me a little bit about that report. You projected 10 to 20% growth.
In fact, currently, more than that, because currently trade between India and Pakistan is about $2.5 billion. It's there's some informal trade going on via Dubai, but this is the directly measured trade. And our estimates show that trade on the basis of all the indicators could be 10 times that amount. And so we're talking about $25 to $30 billion.
10 times that amount right now without any change in the political scenario, or 10 times that amount with some tweaking?
Not necessarily political scenario. I think, yes, of course, political scenario matters a lot, the politics between the two countries. No, I think what is the biggest constraint right now is physical infrastructure. You don't have the roads, you don't have the ports, and so on. These will take time. But I'm saying if you project down about 5 years from now and you get all that infrastructure in place, then I think trade could be 10 times as much as that. And this project that we were doing was going on, has been going on for a year and a half and is continuing. And I think apart from all the analytical work and talk to government, etc., we actually went and talked to the chambers of commerce and traders around the country as to what they saw was the potential and what they saw were the constraints. And then we wrote a report on that and gave it to the government. We were essentially working to help the Pakistan Business Council and the government in there.
So let's talk to the two business people that we have here. Abid, if we still have you on the phone, are you thinking of...
And I would just like to follow up on that. I mean, what Mr. Khan is saying, actually coming from someone who's on the ground and related to ports and ships and stuff like that, I have to tell you that Pakistan is actually, if trade relations with India improve and if the border opens and we get rid of these non-tariff barriers that are also sort of in the way aside from the tariff barriers, I think Pakistan is so uniquely placed because contrary to what Mr. Khan is saying, Pakistan actually has underutilized ports, and India has ports that are totally crowded and clogged up. So potentially, Pakistani ports can be used for northern Indian cities, northern India, and Pakistani roads, which are actually, I think, having a trucking fleet, I can tell you they're not that bad if you compare them to Bangladesh or you compare it to India even. And Pakistani roads can be used, the old Silk route can be revived, and Pakistani roads can be used for the go-between between Indian goods between India and Central Asia, Afghanistan. All these countries, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Kyrgyzstan,
so,
all of these countries
is it not
have
happening?
Pakistan as the closest port to all of them.
So, Abid, is it not happening right now because of the political tension between the two countries?
Well, right now, the Pakistan-Afghanistan trade agreement, which has been signed and agreed by our cabinet, has not been put into place for various sort of reasons, bureaucratic reasons, and that's been done. It's been something like 13, 14 months since the thing was agreed. Maybe Mr. Khan can shed some light, but I don't. For some political reasons, for some bureaucratic reasons, it's not been put in place on the western side. On the eastern side, it's very cumbersome. Right now, the way the rules work, that Pakistani trucks have to unload their cargo once they cross Wagah on the Atari side, and an Indian truck will take that cargo in. So that's very cumbersome, and it's not very it's not very practical. It's still happening, but you can't go mad on that. I mean, there's only so much you can do. So of course, with trust and with more secure ways.
And what you describe right now with the trucks unloading and loading with an Indian truck, that obviously has to do with politics, because there seems to be no other reason for that. So let me go to Meherbana. Meherbana, are you thinking of, is India one of the countries that you are either already selling or thinking of expanding into?
Yes, we've just completed a deal with one of the largest cosmetic and personal care goods distributors in India. And region by region, we're having a soft launch in the summer. And then region by region, as you know, India is a huge country. So we're going to be slowly penetrating the market over the course of the year.
So these problems that Abid Butt is describing, or what Mr. Mohsin Khan have described, do they apply to you since you manufacture out of Pakistan? Can you just send directly to India?
No, I can't. I have to do it through Dubai, as Mr. Khan mentioned. It's kind of like the undocumented trade between Pakistan and India that he mentioned. However, I do think that we do have better infrastructure, as Abid said, than Bangladesh, and in some cases even better than India. I just feel that if we can get some favorable government policies for Pakistani entrepreneurs, it'll actually prepare us for any agreement with India, because I have my reservations with the upcoming trade agreements.
What would be a favorable policy for you as a Pakistani entrepreneur?
One of them would be that some kind of regulation on imports. It's as Abid will attest, it's a very haphazard process. The duty schedule that was made for, okay, I can talk about my industry, but the duty schedule was last revised in 1973.
Okay.
There's been no revision on tariffs.
And we'll come back to some of your reservations about the upcoming trade agreement. But Mr. Khan, I want to ask you, these things that these entrepreneurs have described, obviously you have mentioned some of this in your report. You've talked to the Pakistani Chambers of Commerce. How receptive is the government, and how much of a political will is there to sort out these issues?
Well, I think that the Pakistani business community, by and large, although they have some reservations, as your guests, the other guests are mentioning, have been the ones that have been pushing this. I mean, they are essentially the ones. Then came the political parties and the government. And the government, in fact, realized that, essentially, it had to, in fact, to develop, for long-term development, had to have access to this large and growing market. India, on the other hand, saw this early, not only as Pakistan a good market, but as they are looking at transit routes through Pakistan to the Central Asian countries, China, Afghanistan, and so on. So there's a win-win situation for that. But I will say quite openly that for a long period of time, no discussion was taking place, and that was primarily because it was thought that the military in Pakistan opposed the idea of opening up trade. Indeed, perhaps they did, but in our discussions with them, with the military people, they realized as well that economic trade with India was essential for the development of Pakistan. And so right now, virtually everyone is on board. All the political parties are on board. Businesses, except for we shouldn't mention them, some businesses will be hurt and therefore are not. But by and large, businesses are. Agriculture, to some extent, says that we have barriers because the Indians subsidize agriculture a lot, and so we're at a disadvantage. But this is a process that I don't think, let me put it this way, Aisha. 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, nobody would have thought that this would happen in 2013. Now, in 2013, we're getting very impatient. Well, why isn't it happening faster? I mean, so this is a question that, but it will happen. And I think that no one, as far as I know, other than perhaps some ultra-nationalists in the country, have opposed this idea.
And actually, some experts that we've talked to have said that better trade relations will automatically lead to better political relations, because once you're involved in each other's economies, it's kind of like America and China. They're not going to go to war because they depend on each other.
Yeah.
But Abid, I want to come back to the success of companies like yours and like Meherbano's, and I am sure you'll attest to it that there are more than 100 companies in Pakistan that are doing well. I read on the All World website that they're thinking of doing the Pakistan 250. But before I go on to talk about that, you guys initially were placed within the All World Network in the Arabia 500, and here is why. Let's listen to what Ann Habibi had to say about that.
We made a bold decision, which was to put the Pakistan 100 in what we call the Arabia 500. This is the Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey, and we put Pakistan in there. Why? Because the rest of the region needs to get to know the new Pakistan. and the new Pakistan needs to be integrated into the rest of the region. So there's also a much bigger regional play. Also, Pakistan will now anchor what we call the South Asia 250. So Pakistan will be a very unusual country. It will go towards the west as part of the Middle East and North Africa, and then towards South Asia. We believe Pakistan is one of the greatest growth and investment opportunities for the next 10 years. So we want to be part of the South Asia program and the Arabia program, and maybe its own 500.
So Abid, in the South Asia 250, do you hope to be at the top of the list again?
I mean, no doubt. Pakistan, in terms of nominal growth, I mean, if you talk about nominal growth, yeah, I think we will surpass our counterparts to the east. But I mean, I do believe that there's a lot that, in addition to just physical trade, there's a lot we can learn once from the Indian companies once they do join up the Pakistan 100 with the with the Indian companies. And there's a lot to be gained. I just have one more point on this front. I just think that trade can improve and business interaction will improve the political situation as well. But for businesses, what we don't want is we go down a path and then because of one incident or one event we have to reverse. We have to go in reverse gear. That's something that I'm wary of, and I'm sure my counterparts on the other side are also very.
And I'm sure you're mentioning to the event that happened in Mumbai, the Mumbai attacks, that the whole political relationship between the two countries crumpled. But Abid, what I want to ask you is, since you've been so successful against all odds, has anyone from the government approached you and said, hey, what are you doing? Can you teach us? Can you help us teach other companies? Have you been involved in something like that, either on a government level or on a private level?
Absolutely. On the private level, I mean, there's an institute today. In fact, today I was at IBA. They have an entrepreneurship program that Aman Foundation has set up for them, and I was there, mentoring some entrepreneurs. I'm part of some similar things with the Acumen Fund in Pakistan. They have a global leader program, where they're making social projects, entrepreneurial as feasible, financially feasible as possible. So there's a lot to do, and I'm actually investing in sometimes in some of these projects also because actually they do make business sense. So as I was telling you earlier, being in Pakistan for me is like being a kid in a candy store. There's so much to do. You just don't know,
and that's not how it's perceived around the world. But you're trying to change that perception. Meher Bano, I want to come to you. There are a lot of people in Pakistan who write to us on Facebook, on social media, who say there are no jobs. What do we do? Is there something that you want to tell them?
Well, what I'd really like to tell them.
Okay, so your Skype is frozen, so we'll come. Okay, Meher Bano, we'll come right back to you. Abid, same question to you.
Could you repeat the question again?
Yes, I was saying there are a lot of young people who write to us who are concerned that after their education they won't find jobs, they don't know what to do. Is there something you want to tell them?
I mean, I want to tell them that do your own thing. Why would you want to look for a job? Do your own thing. I have a saying that was quoted quite a lot in the press here, which is "Paan ki dukaan ho, lekin apni ho," which means that even if you have a small corner shop,
it should be your own. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have today to talk about this issue. I thank you all so much. Abid Butt of E2E, Meher Bano Sethi of Luscious Cosmetics, and Mohsin Khan, an economist who recently came out with a report on India-Pakistan trade. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you tune in again for another episode of Access Point. But do not forget to leave your suggestions, your ideas, your comments. We read each and every one of them. Goodbye.